Yeah, where were we? Where were we? We did have some interesting chats there, but some really bad ones too. Tell you what's interesting. I made the most money off of that stream I've ever made on TikTok. I think it's because it's not linear, like they give you rewards and stuff and bonuses. Or maybe someone tipped me, actually. I did see some people tipping. Yeah. I do think it's possible that I think I read that you don't make money on TikTok from just streaming. You only make money on TikTok from gifts. So anyway, someone gave me 40 pence, which is more than the 12 pence that my account has been sitting on for a while. Maybe that can go towards boosting our, adverts and videos for the movement. So, yeah. Oh, I feel so much better after going to the loo. Sorry for that inconvenience. Hell yeah. What should we debate next? Who will we debate next? Yeah, the vegan teacher was in the stream, watching. I was tempted to invite her on, but I felt like she was just going to troll. But maybe we just have to accept the trolling of larger channels, right? If someone's going to troll like the vegan teacher, or if they have 1 million followers, maybe we should try and manage the trolling, accept the trolling a little bit, see if we can benefit from their trolling. It's possible. Yeah, we can definitely keep a lookout for high channel guests. See, in the viewer queue, you see, it tells you if they have like a lot of followers. It's a little bit slow. A little bit slow. Let's get into the extinction mentality. Think about something to go into, perhaps. Okay, here's one. I think most people's problem with extinction is, well, you have to look at most problems with extinction in a biological sense, because crazy people are against extinction, and non-crazy people are in favor of extinction. Now, that's easily provable, right? This is scientific fact and truth. Because, we can debate someone who's against extinction, and they will demonstrably say things that are crazy. Things that you can prove are crazy. Right? So if you can prove that people are crazy, then that's pretty big, right? You can't take the words of a crazy person very seriously, right? So if you can prove that, then that's pretty big for the movement. But that is, I would say, an undeniable fact. If you look at the debates that me and Steve have done on YouTube, or even on TikTok, the guests just start saying crazy things. And extinctionism is about intelligence and rationality. And so we are not closed-minded, we are open-minded. And essentially what that means is that if someone brings something rational and sensical and logical to us, then we are open to it. So our mind can be changed by reason. But no one has brought any sort of reason to us that makes babies getting abused acceptable. And I think a great way of looking at why, how extinction is right is to just look at simple morality. I think that getting back to what I said at the start, people are biologically sort of genetically against extinction because they don't have a full rationalization of the world or, life and stuff like that. Most people don't have time to think about these questions. Most people don't have the intelligence to think about these questions. And life and nature doesn't need you to think about these questions. And in fact, it is completely contrary to nature's, success metric of mindless survival and mindless reproduction to actually question these things and existence. So nature essentially makes you favor existence and incapable of questioning it. That's why I think a lot of people could, it's easier to explain animal extinction to them. But when you say total extinction, it's kind of like a step too far for their mind to understand. All right, so we are waiting for guests to join, and if anyone wants to come on, that would be great. In the meantime, we shall continue. So, it's really sort of, people keep bringing up this balance. This balance that they're obsessed with is really just a biological mechanism in the mind, in the brain. And again, it's not hard to understand. Nature essentially made it so that animals, A, didn't need to think about this stuff to survive and reproduce, and B, actively made it so that they wouldn't think about this stuff, because if they questioned existence and realized that it was a bad thing, then how could they possibly continue on mindlessly surviving and reproducing? And the same goes for empathy. You wouldn't have lions surviving very long if they suddenly felt empathy. So that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with naturally, biologically, genetically warped and twisted sort of positions. In the same way that, you can't convince a cat to stop hunting mice. You wouldn't be able to explain to it why, that's a bad thing. It'd be impossible, right? That sort of, in the mind of a cat, hunting and murdering mice is a good thing, right? And in the same way, in the mind of these animalistic humans that we live with, suffering is a good thing. Babies getting abused is a good thing. It's acceptable, but it's not acceptable, and it takes an extreme amount of forced irrationality to maintain these crazy perspectives and opinions. So actually, the amount of neurological and psychological forces that are enforcing these irrational opinions, such as, suffering's fine, it's acceptable. It's a lot of force, okay? And there's a great explanation behind that as well, which is, so again, nature, dramatically relies on this forced irrationality and forced sort of mentalities of eating other animals is fine. I just need to survive and reproduce and be comfortable. That's it. But these are very animalistic understandings and ways to operate. And that's obvious, right? Because we are talking about animals. Humans didn't evolve inside houses, right? They evolved as animals in nature. So the idea that humans have perfect capacity for empathy is a myth. You wouldn't have humans, murdering each other and animals and being tribalistic and hostile and against peaceful cooperation, world peace. Unless they were made to be insane. And so, yeah, the force that is maintaining that insanity is massive. It's not a thin veil or anything like that can just be lifted off. It is a gigantic force, which is effectively, it might be breakable, but that is something that, well, personally, I'm researching. So I've taken on the responsibility to do that research. But either way, it's an incredibly powerful force that maintains the irrationality that, again, we can scientifically prove exists. So, yeah, that is one of our greatest obstacles, is that you can't rationalize humans because their natural bias is so overwhelmingly powerful. In the same way that you would struggle to get a monkey to have any sort of comprehensive system of morality or ethics, right? So what's different with humans? They can talk, but they're still. It's not just the monkey's inability to speak which keeps him animalistic and potentially aggressive and stuff like that, right? It's his just being able to speak, which is what humans have got, doesn't suddenly remove all of that stuff. No, and that's, I guess, the one of the greatest myths. Logic to failure. Logic has no morality. Yeah, that's a great topic as well, right? All of this philosophy that you've got in the world, right? It's a waste of time. It's not suffering focused. It's not focused on the good or the greater good. It's just waffle. It's distraction, right? So yeah, you. The thing is, if you want your logic to be valid, it has to essentially serve a correct purpose. Logic for the sake of logic is like logic in a vacuum. It's just pointless. What makes it valid is whether or not it is doing good in a system where good is necessary and can be done. Where you have living beings that either suffer or can be made safe from suffering. And yeah, there is nothing bad outside of suffering. Can you name something bad that doesn't involve suffering or the risk of suffering? It's difficult to do so. So that means that the philosophy and the logic is inherently tied to suffering, ethics, and the way to run the world. Essentially, logic and philosophy has to do something actively good in order to be valid and to be useful, right? Otherwise, it's just meaningless nonsense. It might sound meaningful for the people that are trying to cope with life and to survive. That Holocaust survivor saying life is beautiful and stuff. And maybe that's straw manning a little bit. Maybe he was just trying to say that, if you've had a terrible experience, I think you can find a way to, be okay. So I'm not going to blame that guy or anything for that. I think that would be a bit too much. But, the bigger picture, you have to look at prevention of suffering, prevention of harm. Okay, the queue is still empty. That's fine. We can keep on going. So, yeah, I think basic morality is very simple, right? If you had let's think of it as a pleasure boat or a cruise, okay? And let's say there's 10 people on this boat, and they're all having a great time, and it's going down the river. But then someone says, like, "Oh, I'm in horrific pain. Something's wrong. I need an ambulance, I need a hospital, or I feel terribly seasick, please stop the boat. Obviously, if everyone else is saying, what about the balance though? What do you mean, stop the boat? We're having too much fun. They can come up with all sorts of ways to sort of defend and excuse that horrible behavior. And I think one of the main ways that people really obfuscate the truth and sort of hide from the truth of extreme suffering is, with fantasy sort of optimistic takes. I guess essentially they're straw manning, maybe without even realizing it. So when they say that, there's suffering in the world, but, those that suffer can opt out, right? This is one of those demonstrably crazy things that people say that are indicative of extreme mental defects. What else could you put it down to? So there's no kind of rationality behind it. And on our YouTube debates that go on for like 1 or 2 hours, you can see this in its extreme form, where we absolutely destroy the positions of people that are defending suffering, to where they say, yeah, you know what, you're right, but I still don't agree. Which is a crazy thing, to be able to say that, to be able to say you're right but I'd still disagree. That is essentially excellent proof of extreme brain defects. So the people that are kind of saying, what about my opinion? Well, your opinion is wrong and worthless, right? It's an irrational opinion. It doesn't deserve to be taken seriously. And it's demonstrably hypocritical, wrong, immoral, selfish, small-minded, and usually also founded on extreme irrationalities, extreme misunderstandings, warped perceptions of reality, like, suffering's not that bad, or, you'll have people saying that unaliving yourself isn't a horrible experience. And that's one of the most egregious ones, right? That's one of the worst ones, when people say that opting out, again, as they cruelly put it, right? Or unaliving yourself, to say that's not a horrible experience is truly dishonest. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good, good. Say, I just wanted to ask you a question and I'll leave. I take my question off the air. If you take your philosophy to its ultimate conclusion and you're able to get rid of life in the universe, why wouldn't the project ultimately fail? Because the universe just creates life, whatever, the imploding universe theory or whatever. That's all.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a very good question. I'm not gonna. Maybe he thought I would react badly to it, but it is actually a good question. So, firstly, you know, having an animal-free planet is already a good thing. So, you know, even if we can't do anything about the universe, we can already do something good on the planet. Okay, by having a suffering-free planet. So there's no reason not to have a suffering-free planet just because the universe might be challenging to deal with as well. Okay, but also, we can try and deal with the universe, right? People essentially see it as a great challenge and therefore say that it's not worth taking on. But even if you do, half of the universe or a billionth of the universe. If we can do some good, then that's better than nothing. And people will then say, well, what if life redevelops? Well, if it does, then that would be a shame, but it would be good that we prevented lots of suffering in the meantime. But ultimately, our mission is the most vast and thorough extinction physically possible. And now maybe we need to improve the language there, but it's pretty good. Because we need to go to the absolute ends of the universe if possible, to do everything possible, and to explore just how much of the universe we can control. We might be able to. I mean, people have a very small, sort of narrow-minded view on this, but really, humanity has already achieved so much scientifically and technologically speaking within the last 50 years. If you scale that up to thousands of years from now, the things that we might be able to do would be mind-blowing, right? And so far beyond today's comprehension. You could have self-replicating robots go out into the universe and do it for you. You might not even need humans to be doing anything. And, we're already seeing that AI has incredible capabilities and is promising an incredible future. So our ability to deal with suffering and to fight against it is just getting better every day. All right. Hello.
Hey, James.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. So I'm just trying to understand. So you're saying to prevent the suffering that comes along with humanity, we should make
All life.
all life.
It's not just about humanity. Humans are the minority.
So do we kill the otters and the beavers and the hyraxes?
We would say euthanasia, because that's a more ethical way to do things, right? Thing about killing is that it's by default not an ethical thing. So that means that you could do it in awful ways and do it sadistically
Is
even.
this a
So
parody or is this a real movement?
it's a real movement. I didn't start it. I'm just a
How,
part of it.
okay, how would we euthanize every living creature?
It's a great question, and effectively, that's one of the questions that we want to be able to answer. You could already kind of start to do it. For example,
Where do
okay,
we start?
so for example, the animal agriculture industry. Billions of chickens and cows are eaten by humans every year. If we wanted to, not do that anymore, then making that population of agricultural animals extinct is already extremely possible. So controlling animal populations is something that we already do as a species on an extremely large scale. And
So real
yeah,
quick, so we start with the farm animals because that's where my question is. Where would this movement start?
it's difficult to answer that because we can't see the future, we can't see what the situation is going to be like, but it kind of depends on how events unfold.
When
But
real quick.
I guess maybe we'd go with wild animals first.
Okay. And then once we get through live animals, then we start with people. What type of people go first?
So yeah, so the thing is, we want a suffering-free planet with no animals, and then potentially to be looking at causing extinction for the universe and preventing life from developing, mostly. So in that sense, humanity may need to stay around for a long time. However, if we can either if we decide that there's nothing we can do for the universe after extensive research, or or if we decide that we can rely on robots to do the mission without us, in that case, then yeah, there'd probably be no need for humanity.
So
And
program robots, program machines to kill anything that lives.
Euthanized,
Euthanize.
but
So you're saying euthanize. So you're
it's
saying
more
like
about prevention.
inject them. How? What is the euthanization process?
I don't know. We need to find the answers to those questions, right? That's what our movement is about. Is about working towards achieving this.
And what
But it's
about
mostly about prevention. So, most of the victims we want to help don't exist. They're in the future, and we're trying to prevent them from existing. So that's
this
not
is a
about.
parody, right?
No, I mean,
This
animals will
isn't a
continue.
joke. So you're saying we should get rid of all life to prevent future suffering.
Yes.
So kill people to stop
Not kill. Not kill.
pain in the future. Euthanize people. I mean, dude, it's to me a farce because first off, do you know how many fish are in the sea? Do you know how much life is in the depths of the oceans that we can't even physically get to?
Well, you say we can't physically get to them, right? But
We can't.
that's something that can change, right?
Okay, how do we? Okay, how about the bacterium that lives in the vents at the bottom of the ocean? That's life.
Yep.
How are we going to kill them? Are we going to euthanize them, the bacterium that live in the volcanic vents at the bottom of the ocean?
Potentially.
Potentially. I have to say, I think it's both sad and funny. If this
Okay.
was a parody, I would
Do
think
you
it
think
was
suffering is
hilarious.
do you think suffering is sad?
I think it's hilarious that you say euthanize all things, end life to prevent suffering. That to me is funny
But how else do you end
because
suffering?
how there is no end to suffering
Right. So
because
that's a bad
that's just life. There's no,
Well, no,
I
that's
mean,
not
look,
just life.
so it's,
That's that's just terrible, right?
I mean, it's pretty terrible to think about killing every living creature. I have to be honest. I mean, you're just going to
We're
round
not
up
talking about killing
everything.
every living creature. Again, euthanasia is the responsible way to do things, but I don't think it's
How are
terrible
you
to
going to
say
euthanize a shark?
in just the best way that there is, right?
What is that? Like you catch it and you inject it with sodium pentothal or sodium bicarbonate or whatever. I mean,
If I
whatever they use for the lethal injection, sodium
let, let me ask you a question,
barbitol.
Tom. Let me ask you a question. If someone says we should cure cancer, would you say, "Well, how are you gonna do that, honey? Right? We don't have a cure for cancer." No, you'd say, "Right,
No,
we need to do
I would say
we need
that
to find."
there's I would say they're working on it and they are
Yeah.
figuring out ways to cure cancer.
So they don't need the answers to begin with, because that you've
But
got it the wrong way round. You're saying, why should we look for the answers if we don't have the answers already, right? So
so you
that's
think that the
insane.
answer is to get rid of all life. So then who is there to experience the no suffering?
Well, you see, you've got it the wrong way around again, right? There will be no suffering if there's no one forced to experience it.
Right, but there will also be no joy. And there will also be no life.
Yeah,
So
but
what's the point of getting
that's
rid of
what rapists say, though, right? They say, if I'm not allowed to rape, then I won't have my joy, right?
do they say that?
Yes.
That's weird. I mean, look, let's
Yeah, but
say
that's what
in
you're
your
saying, basically,
plan,
right?
let's say in
But
your plan, okay, to get rid of all
if we
life.
have no victims, we can't have fun, is what you're saying, right? It's the same. It's like a rapist mentality.
You're saying I have a rapist mentality because
Yeah.
I think it's silly to kill all life
No,
to
because you're defending unlimited suffering continuing forever, just like you said it would, right? Just so that others can have fun.
dude, it's pretty hilarious. So you're saying, okay, we get rid of all the squirrels,
Yeah.
we get rid of all the marmots, we get rid of all the ferrets, all of the
Yeah. Do you
all
want
of
to
these.
cut to the point?
Well, what suffering does a squirrel cause?
Lots. When a when a squirrel has children, and they suffer, or they get eaten alive, that's suffering. Or when that squirrel itself gets eaten alive, it's going to suffer, right?
So you're saying it suffers by getting eaten alive. So let's just euthanize it.
We're saying that no one should have to suffer and be forced to exist, right? So there's only one way to stop
What
that.
about the ones that want to exist?
But animals don't really have the intelligence to make decisions, right? They're too vulnerable.
This is
Do you think animals are intelligent enough?
seriously one of the funniest and most twisted things I've ever heard.
Right, but you can't present a serious argument against it, Tom. So
Yes, I can. Yes, I
Well, good.
can. Because if you get
Good.
rid of all suffering, but there's no consciousness to witness the lack of suffering, then what's the point?
I mean, that's an objectively insane thing you've just said, right? Do you not realize how crazy that
It's
sounds?
not objectively. I think it's objectively. I think it's objectively insane for you to say we need
Type in
to
the chat, guys.
euthanize
It's the best
all
insane
life
ever.
on Earth. I think that's objectively insane, dude.
But
I think
you're
if we asked
changing the
100
goalpost.
people,
But Tom, you're changing the goalpost. You're trying to evade the question now.
how are you going
Okay.
to get the earthworms? How are you
Okay.
going to get the earthworms that are that?
I'm going to have to kick Tom now because he's kind of broken, basically. Now, that's not Tom's fault. I don't think Tom's a bad person. But he is unfortunately subject to forced irrationality by nature, right? So that's why Tom started saying crazy things, such as, you can't have a lack of suffering if there's no one there to experience the lack of suffering. That's obviously a crazy thing to say. Which just proves my point, really, that to be against extinction is to be objectively crazy. Like, objectively crazy. Scientifically, provably crazy. So, you won't hear me saying crazy things. And if I do, then please correct me. And, I'll essentially address it. But, the people arguing against extinction are saying really crazy things. And you can only assume that they don't realize how crazy it is what they're saying, which is another fascinating phenomenon. Really fascinating. Hello.
Hi, hello. What's up?
How's it going?
I'm good. Is this a real thing? Like
Yeah.
for extension? Okay, whose
We are
idea is it?
with
Is
the
it?
movement to end suffering. Yeah.
Yeah, so you just want to end everything? Is that
Prevent
that
as
it?
much prevent as much suffering as possible. Prevent as many victims from being forced into existence and suffering as possible.
Yeah, so you want to have people choose not to have kids, for example? You want
No.
to have the option?
So most of the life we want to help are non-humans. Most of the life on the planet are animals, and they suffer worse than we do. And so if humanity went extinct tomorrow, there'd be no way to help those animals. So humanity has to stay alive, stay strong, stay healthy, so that we can help others first. We want to have an animal-free planet and potentially an animal-free universe if we can. So in that sense, there's lots of life depending on us because they're not intelligent or capable of helping themselves and ending suffering for themselves and their species.
Yeah, of course, but evolution has been around, and they're gonna have to suffer at some point if they want to continue existing. That's the way it's always worked,
But no one chooses to
right?
exist, right? They're forced to exist non-consensually. They don't get a choice. And for the vast majority of life that gets forced to exist, they die a painful death in childhood. So they don't get to have a good life. They have terrible conditions, extreme suffering, and most of them get eaten alive. Would you want to be eaten alive? Probably not, right?
Yeah,
So
of course
yeah,
not. But
the
yeah,
suffering is
it's just,
extreme.
to me, it's just part of the cycle. At the end
Uh,
of the day, if you want it, that's not going to work unless you kill all the animals. I don't think that's possible, really, because if you get rid of one group, for example, the other groups will also suffer even more because they're depending on it,
right,
some
but
way or
we
another.
should euthanize all animals that need to be saved from suffering. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be difficult. No one said it's going to be easy, but
Yeah,
there is a way.
of course.
So yeah, we should end all suffering, prevent all suffering, and people have a very warped morality, really, where they think
Mm.
that babies should get abused so that others can have fun. No, the extreme suffering that these victims experience is so bad, so terrible, so over the top, so insanely bad, right? That it is really cruel and wrong. And all we have to do is give up our privilege, our fun, to help them, right?
Yeah, okay. How about, food? I don't think we could, for example, kill all the animals, including the bees. Who's gonna be fertilizing our food and uh, stuff like that? I figure you're
Yeah.
vegan.
Uh, well, no, I'm not vegan, but it is a good question. And yeah, we need to systematically replace our dependence on animals. So that might mean changing the way we grow food. It might mean having robot bees or something. But I'm not saying it's, we can't say what the future is going to look like, but we should work towards it, right? And it might be difficult. It might take a long time to have a habitable planet without animals. It might be very difficult, but
Yeah.
the victims are depending on us to do it.
Yeah, to me, it's like if we're gonna have a step like that or something that's revolutionary like that, it's gonna need much more time than we think. It's like wanting to
Yeah,
colonize Mars, it's not gonna happen. And even 100 years, I don't think so.
yeah. I
And
mean, we expect our mission to take a very long time. Um,
yeah, that's the thing. Okay, thank you for.
Thank you for coming on. Have a great day. All right. Um, we do have another person. Hello.
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 Good. How are you? Do I turn my camera on?
It's up to you. But most people don't. You can if you want.
Um, oh well. So I guess I just kind of stumbled upon this, and I think like what is the goal, or do you think you said that it's gonna take a lot of work, so the means to make that happen is not available yet, right? Like, there's no way to like get all the worms and stuff, right?
Yeah, and in the same way that the cure for cancer doesn't exist, but people are working on it, it's something that has to be worked towards.
Well, like as humans, we're animals, so you would leave us robots to just eliminate all life.
We want to have animal extinction, and then potential universe extinction, and then finally humans. But we want
Um,
humans to for now because we're the only ones that can do it.
do you think at like a microbiological level that's feasible? Like
Yeah.
that humans can even exist without like fungi in the soil and stuff?
Um, Yeah, I mean, we might be able to have plants or plant life or synthetic plant life, maybe. Um, but yeah, I mean, it might take a very long time. Think of, if you think of it on a sort of thousands of years sort of scale, it becomes a bit easier to understand, right?
I mean, I feel like I can like empathize with you and kind of see like the goal and like to like prevent suffering. And I've had my own time with. I've done my fair little learning about Buddhism and like suffering and stuff. But like what about when like things that are innocent aren't always they don't necessarily stay innocent forever, but I mean most of the time the innocent are going to suffer, right? So I guess that's the goal here, is to just kind of prevent that.
The goal is simply a world with no suffering, right? Where no one has to suffer, no one is forced to exist and to suffer a hell-like life. They are the priority. They take priority over everything else. And they need help, and they need it at all costs, basically.
Well, do you think that's just completely impossible without it? Like, is extinction like the only way to go about doing that?
Yeah, we've looked into it, and basically, unless you have godlike powers, then there's no way to provide 100% safety for 100% of life. Extinction is the only way to do it.
Well, I mean, like the way you go about the way I see going about this, like where all animals and life is extinct already, um, and then you're relying on robots. That is similar to like a godlike power. Why not just
It's
go about
not
it another way?
because it's much more practical and realistic than that. Essentially, we can already do extinction now, but we can't. We don't have godlike powers now. Okay, and we probably never will. Um, so we're operating practically and realistic way. I mean, so I'll give you an example. There's something like 100 or 200 billion farmed animals each year. We can already make those go extinct if we want to. It'd be extremely easy to do so, right? Extremely easy. So we already control animal populations. We do deforestation. We build factories. We build data centers. We build mining operations. And we make it impossible for wild animals to live in these places.
Yeah, well, I definitely am like an environmentalist type of thing, like a tree hugger hippie type. So I can't I don't know. I feel like I can see I can see that. Like, what does your like end game look like? Is it just like a barren planet like Mars or something?
That's a good question. It might be like Coruscant from Star Wars. It could be an irradiated wasteland, and we don't know. These are all questions that the movement wants to answer in the future and wants to work on. But the thing is that there's so many of these questions, and it's unnecessary and an inefficient use of our time to just sit around thinking about them all day. Essentially, the best thing we can do is grow the movement, grow the messaging and the ethics and the ideology, uh, grow the resources, and essentially just that is what's going to make it more possible to achieve ending suffering.
All right. Uh, I don't know. I just as a human prefer to embrace my my more animalistic side than my like more like robotic computer kind of self.
That's fair. I mean, that's the existence that people have been forced into. Nobody, even Hitler, didn't choose to be Hitler, right? Um, he was born into it, I would say.
Yeah, I have. I mean, it's just cool seeing someone do something like this. I don't really. see things like this too often, and you look like you're intelligent. But and I'm not saying that you're not, but I just have wild ideas about of radically different futures. But you're right about how sitting around thinking about those things don't do anything. That's why I have like devoted myself to learning science and stuff like that. I just but can you see how like people just see this as like a radical kind of thing? But I mean, I understand that most people don't understand a lot of things, I guess.
Most of the activists that have joined this movement didn't find any difficulty in agreeing with it or joining. They heard, should we work towards a world with no suffering and no forced existence? And people like myself just said that sounds amazing. I'm so glad there's finally a movement working towards this. Suffering is too extreme and terrible to allow, and we should do it to prevent more innocence being forced to exist and to experience hell-like, atrocious, terrible suffering.
Well, I mean, I guess you got a point there. I'll go ahead and let you go, and I'll check out proextinction.com and stuff. This is new to me.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks for coming on. Have a great day. All right. Queue is empty at the minute, Luke. So we are free to take on new challenges. Yeah, as I was saying just then, it's simply, you kind of have two types of people in the world. Some that agree that, suffering is so bad that it should be the priority, and that, we should, that the worst thing in the world, and I challenge everyone in the chat to come up with a counter argument or counter example. The worst thing in the world is a life form being forced to exist and to experience hell-like suffering that they can't escape, okay? And that is the case for the majority of life on this planet. Most life born on the planet gets eaten alive as a baby, a few days old, after they've already experienced starvation, freezing temperatures, parasites, diseases, brain damage maybe, all sorts of horrible things. And if you really think about the worst ones, then you start to realize just how unacceptable it is.
Do you?
Yes. Hi, how's it going?
Hey, man. My name is Sam. I'm 28. I don't know, man. I gotta be honest, your panel title kind of scares me here. You want to make all life permanently extinct? I want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. You want to make all life permanently extinct? Is that true?
Yeah.
And why? Maybe you covered this, but I missed it.
It's the only way to prevent billions of years of more pointless suffering. It's the only way to protect all life from extreme suffering and fates worse than non-existence. No one should have to suffer. No one should have to be born into a life they never asked for, and are essentially imprisoned in, and to get tortured.
Yes, that is all true, but it is making all life going extinct is also the only way to prevent a lot of happiness and a lot of good and a lot of productivity and all the good things that come with it. So life has good and bad, and yes, you pointed out the bad, but there's also good on the other side. So why do you...
But you could say the same thing about a rapist, right? There's lots of suffering involved, but there's lots of fun and pleasure and joy.
How about, yeah, sure, a rapist. How about an engineer or a doctor who's morally good, or how about there's always good to every bad? Why do you want to just erase it all?
Because it's not fair, for starters, right? It's obviously wrong that we shouldn't let others suffer and use their suffering for our benefit.
You're always going to have that with life, of course, but I said you can point out all the bad. You can point out the bad for the next 20 minutes if you want to keep talking about that, but there's always also good, right? So why do you just want to erase it all? So you can keep talking for the next 20 minutes about how horrible the world is, and you wouldn't be wrong, but okay. I don't know if erasing everything is a solution. when there's
Think,
good as
yeah,
well.
think of it this way. Think of two family members that you really care about. Maybe it's your mother and your father. Would you send your mother to hell just so that your father could go to heaven? Um, Probably not, right?
Why is that? It would have to be a choice. Why does one person have
Because
to suffer for another person to benefit?
well, exactly. That's the reality that we live in.
That's not the
So
reality
that's
we live in.
well, it is. I
It's
mean, we
not.
have extreme suffering all around us. To deny that would be very
I'm not denying
dishonest.
that. I'm not denying that. I said you're right when you said that there's a lot of suffering, a lot of horrible things in the world. But I'm saying there's also good things on the flip side. And the point you just brought up was that if I had to send my mother to hell and my father to heaven or something like that, you're making the point that somebody in the world has to suffer for somebody else to benefit or gain pleasure. And that's not necessarily the case. It can be the case, but that's not good, right? Robbing a bank is not good
So
because
you
you're.
say that doesn't have to be the case, but that's wrong. As long as life exists, there will always be suffering and the risk of suffering, right?
Yeah,
So
you're
for
right.
the victim, it's terribly wrong and unfair and cruel.
It is. I'm not denying that. But I'm saying your solution is, I'm sorry, it's just kind of egregious, I think, to make everything just go away. Because, again, like you can just, be here and talk for 20, 30 minutes, an hour about all the horrible things, and you'd be right. But I'm saying there's also good on the flip side. And to your point, just because somebody suffers doesn't mean, or just because somebody has a good doesn't mean somebody has to suffer, right? If I go and I do good things, or if I go to a homeless pantry and food pantry and I give $10,000 worth of food, nobody's suffering. Everybody's just, well, what am I suffering for? I gave up some money.
Nobody's suffering.
Exactly. So there's a lot of good things.
But that's very naive, right? That's wrong. It's inaccurate.
Why? Why?
Most of those homeless people probably are suffering in lots of different ways.
Yes, and I'm helping them in my example.
Right, but to say that there's no suffering is just inaccurate and naive, right?
I didn't say there's no suffering.
You did.
I didn't say that. When did I ever say there's no suffering in the world?
No, you said in your example there'd be no suffering, right? But actually, there's lots of suffering.
No. There's no suffering in the specific actions of going to help them. They are suffering, but in my specific example of me going to choose to help them, there's no suffering involved. There's curing of suffering in me doing that.
Right, but not necessarily, right? You have to look at things in the bigger picture, right? In context.
What would be the context in my example?
So you're only helping some homeless people, and whereas there's lots of suffering going on elsewhere, right?
Yes, I'm not denying that. Again, like I said, you can say there's always suffering. I'm not denying that. But I'm saying your solution is wrong.
Why?
Because there's also a lot of good. You're erasing there's good and evil in the world, and you're just erasing everything.
But, when a police officer tackles a criminal who's attacking someone else, right? They're doing harm to that criminal. They're taking away the joy, the pleasure, the fun of that criminal. But they're doing it to protect the victim, right? And everyone can agree that that's the right thing to do. It's a good thing.
Well, you're tackling the guy. You're not gonna unalive him. You're just preventing somebody innocent from being harmed because that criminal is harming an innocent person.
Basically, what you're saying
and you're
is
preventing
that same criminal behavior and abusing others is acceptable, right?
No, that's not what I'm saying at all.
But that is what I'm saying.
No, because in your example, the police officer is tackling me. He's not, seriously harming him with a weapon. He's just saying, "Hey, get off, leave this person alone."
You're not getting it, right? It's about not allowing suffering at all, right? And not allowing victims. So in the same way that the police officer is going to try and do his job and stop that abuse, that's what extinction is about. It's about stopping abuse, and people that are against it are abusing the victims, right?
You're stopping abuse, but you're also stopping all the good things. That's my point.
Yes, in the same way that a criminal's fun and pleasure isn't as important as the safety of his victim.
No, well, the criminal's probably doing it for some reason, right? He probably wants some kind of money or something. And nobody just attacks them. Or are they mentally ill? Or are they mentally ill?
Well, okay, well, I would say that you're mentally ill if you're saying that babies should get abused so that you can have fun.
Dude, I didn't say that. I didn't say it. I'm saying it can be prevented without ending all life, right?
How?
Well, because you can be stopped. In your example, the police officer can tackle this criminal. Okay, that's stopping
But
the
that,
thing, right?
but that's not realistic, right? That's too little, too late. So if that criminal has just killed someone, the police can no longer do anything about it. The
Well,
victims suffer.
if the criminal has killed somebody, then they're contributing to your solution of extinction, aren't they?
Well, I think you're kind of evading the points now, right? And the thing is that for the vast majority of life, which is wild animals, they're never going to benefit from anything that you're saying, right? It doesn't apply to them. So you're ignoring the vast majority of victims,
Are you talking
sufferers.
about animals now, or we're talking about humans? You want to talk about animals? We can talk about whatever you want.
Well, we're talking about all life, which includes animals.
Yes. I mean, we're talking more about humans now, and with regards to preventing crime from happening, and you're just saying the solution to preventing crime is all life goes extinct. I thought we were talking context of humans. I mean, there's a big
The thing is,
distinction.
as long as there is life and freedom, then there's going to be crime, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
so I could go and make someone suffer right now if I chose to, and
yes,
the
and you can
police
do
might
good things.
turn up an hour later, but the damage is already done. So I didn't, having police and a justice system doesn't protect the victims, right?
It doesn't.
Actually,
Okay,
yeah,
sorry to interrupt, but you're right. You're right. You can go and cause somebody to suffer right now. I don't think you do that, but you can do that right now. Okay. Do you think that suffering, to prevent that suffering, whatever that is worth just erasing all life?
yeah.
Okay, then. So what would your idea be of just causing some? I'm not saying you would do this, obviously, but you would go and, I don't know, hurt somebody. You're not going to do this, obviously, but if you're going to go to the street and rob somebody, some lady's
Well,
purse.
no, we're not talking about that specific example because I mean that's obviously an overreach, mate, isn't it? Yeah.
Give me an example of suffering that you think is worth erasing all of life for.
Well, I mean, firstly, any extreme suffering that. Okay, so.
Are you talking medieval suffering?
Yeah, I think the easiest examples to agree with on this are, a life of pure misery, pure pain, mental illness, brain damage, physical illness, parasites, starvation.
Which is it exists, but it's quite rare.
You just have to look at wild animals in nature. They have no conditions, no safety, right? Even farmed animals have medicine and shelter and safety, euthanasia. Wild animals, for the majority of them, the actual majority, if you look at the numbers, they are eaten alive as babies. They have their eyes picked out of their head, their guts ripped out in front of them, and they have to experience all of this, the terror, the fear that goes along with it. And who knows what other suffering they've had before they got to that point, right? So it's so extreme and terrible for the sentient beings that are experiencing this and that have been forced to experience it, that yeah, many of them would definitely, unquestionably be better off never having been born.
Okay, so yeah, we can definitely talk about animals if you want to do that. So yes, what you said is correct. That's called the food chain. Obviously, you know that, right? There's a hierarchy of predators and things and victims, and if you want to call that. Yeah, there's a food chain, and for the lion to eat, it needs to attack and kill a gazelle, right, every day. That's the food chain. The problem is if you want to make all life go extinct, if you want to make one species go extinct, that disrupts the food chain. Now the lion has to find something else to eat when all gazelles go extinct, right?
Well, maybe you haven't realized, but
And you're going to collapse food chain.
You've changed the goalposts, basically.
We're talking about animals now, not. I mean, if you talk about humans or animals.
I'm saying you've changed topic essentially. We're talking about the suffering, and now you're talking about the logistics of doing it. So that's
you brought up wildlife, so I'm addressing the wildlife point as opposed to humans.
That's irrational.
How's it irrational?
Because you've essentially, without agreeing that you're wrong and been proven wrong, you're just changing subject.
No, I'm not. I'm not changing subjects. You brought up we're talking about life, and you brought up the wildlife example of animals being have their eyes gouged out as babies, right? So now we're moving from humans to animals, and I was addressing your point about animals, and I was bringing up the example of the food chain, right? That's how it is. That's how I was just addressing your point. I was moving the goalpost.
But that's what you're saying is that's how it is. It's just the food chain. But those aren't good arguments to justify suffering, right? The food chain isn't an entity. It doesn't have needs. It doesn't have wants. It doesn't feel. It doesn't suffer. whereas actual animals do, right? So they have infinite value over concepts like a food chain or nature.
Value over what you mean, like moral value, like my value as in not wanting to feel pain.
I mean, it should go without saying that living beings have more value than words and concepts.
Yeah, sure. So, what? So you want to just exterminate? So we're talking about humans or animals? Like, so there's a big distinction, right? Because
All
humans are the
life,
top. Huh?
all. I mean,
Yes,
like the
yes,
background said,
yes,
right?
yes. I know it's all life, but there's a distinction made between humans and animals because humans are apex predators, right? We don't have to worry about the food chain because we can live however life we want without having to worry about something killing us, right? At least in civil environments. So humans
But
can
that's
live
not true.
70, 80
That's
years.
not
What?
true. I mean, there's lots of things that can kill us. I mean, lots of humans get eaten by wild animals,
That's
and even
extremely rare.
it still happens.
It's
And
extremely
even
rare.
then, it doesn't matter, right? To the victims, it's still
I think it
terrible.
does.
And even then, humans still get eaten alive by viruses and terrible things like that.
Yes,
Um, and they suffer in lots of other ways. So it's not just about one way; it's about all types of suffering, right?
correct.
There can be lots of types of extreme suffering, and only extinction provides 100% safety from this happening,
Yes.
and that is what life deserves: 100% safety. Anything less is wrong, really.
Okay, so in our modern world today, most humans, God willing, can live to the age of 80. I don't know where you're from, but I imagine it's not a third world country, right? Most humans, God willing, can live a happy, healthy life to the age of around 80. Okay, without experiencing any extreme medieval torture or without experiencing any eating by a wild animal. Besides, I was just going to bring to your point, getting eaten by a wild animal is probably 0.0001% of deaths. I think that's negligible. Okay, that's very negligible to your point. If
It's not
0.0001.
for the ones that experience it, though.
No, but the problem is that your solution is to wipe out all life because 0.0001% of people are experiencing getting eaten by animals. So not everybody needs to die. 8 billion people need to go
Well,
away.
I think that's a bit of a straw man, don't you?
How is it a strong? It's exactly your point. I said it's a very tiny sample size of humans that get eaten by wild animals because humans are apex predators. Yes, people die from disease and
So
getting eaten by
you're
animals.
presenting that as the only, firstly, as the only reason for extinction, right? When that's obviously not what I've been saying this whole time.
No, you're not. Yes, it's not what you've been saying the whole time, but I'm saying all the suffering and things that you brought up are a very negligent percentage of things that can kill humans. That's why I bring up the point that most humans, a huge amount of percentage of humans, can live a happy, God willing, can live a happy life to the age of 70 or 80. That's an overwhelming percentage. That's probably like 80 or 90% of humans can live a life without extreme suffering. Of course, there's ups and downs, but they can live a pretty decent life to 70 or 80. That's
But they don't
that.
need it, though, right? They don't need that.
But
Whereas the
it's a
victims,
great thing. It's a
but
beautiful thing.
the victims need to not suffer, right? You don't need to have fun. You don't need to have pizza and Netflix. Nothing bad's going to happen to you if you don't have that stuff. And to say that we should just ignore the victims who are being tortured and carry on with our pizza is
Well,
wrong.
we're not ignoring them. We're just not choosing to
You have to ignore them.
exterminate the whole human
You
race.
are ignoring them. You
So I'm
can't
ignoring.
be responsibly aware of all of this suffering and ignore it, right? And be a good person.
It's not about ignoring it. Like I said, I gave you the example of me going to a food pantry and giving tens of thousands of dollars worth of food. That's not ignoring it. That's a solution. That's not exterminating the entire human race. That's a solution that's preventing suffering or curing it. Right? That is not exterminating the whole human race. I'm giving you an example of an alternate solution rather than just killing and blowing everything up. Right?
Right. But the thing is, even if there's just one sufferer, it's too many, right? The thing is that suffering is too extreme and terrible to allow or to accept, especially when, the trade is just some people get to have a bit of fun.
Okay.
Right?
Well, I just want to understand your point exactly here. So if I give you an example of one human gets eaten alive and torn apart by a lion, right? Whatever happens, they go on a safari, something goes wrong. Like one human gets torn and ripped alive by a lion. That
Yeah.
suffering is worth it to exterminate 8 other billion humans.
It would have to be in so I mean, the only way your hypothetical would be fair, which I
I
will
just want to get
engage
your
in.
opinion.
Yeah. I'm on it. I'm on it. The only way for that to work is if like you Thanos them away, right? You click your fingers and they just painlessly disappear. Okay, because obviously otherwise you'd be creating more suffering, a net larger amount of suffering. So if it came down to preventing that person's extreme suffering and everyone just simply stops existing, that would be the right thing to do.
Okay, I think we just agree to disagree here. I see your opinion. I just don't think that exterminating 8 billion lives is worth like one or two people having. I think it's horrible that people suffer like that. They do. I think it's a very small percentage, and I don't think it's worth exterminating 8 billion lives or even more lives because you say all life, not just humans.
What about
Um,
animals?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's more than 8 billion lives. I mean, I was thinking humans, but yes, I don't think one person
So
or
what
one
about okay?
animal
What if we
or
could just get rid of all the animals? Would you agree to that?
well, no, because animals are the food chain, and animals do a lot of great things. Not just giving us food, but for example, bees pollinate. The flowers.
You only care about the
Bees.
way that they're useful to you, right? You don't care about their suffering. It's
I do
just
care about the
about your
suffering.
benefit. It's just about your benefit, right?
Well, no, I
So
was
you
bringing up
have
my benefit, but I do care about. I don't want animals. I want to just
the
go out on the
the
street just
problem
to
with
kill
your
animals.
position, is firstly it's immoral, it's wrong. It's a position founded on abusing the suffering of others. So it's inherently immoral, right? And it also allows for unlimited suffering. It pays no attention to the severity of the suffering, or it just ignores all of it and says it's their suffering is useful to us, so we should just leave it alone, basically.
No, well, I was bringing up the benefits of animals in our entire world.
Yeah,
I
the
don't.
benefits for you, basically, right? But what
No,
about their suffering?
yeah, I don't. Again, I don't advocate for the suffering of animals. I don't go out on the street and just start
You are
killing
advocating for
things.
it by saying that animals should continue to be forced to exist and to suffer. You're
No,
absolutely advocating for their suffering.
no. Well, animals can choose to unalive themselves if they don't want to avoid suffering, right?
Well, that's just a step too far. Uh, Animals can't unalive themselves. That's ridiculous. Even if they could, it would be horrible and wrong for them to have to do it. And, especially, I mean, no animal can unalive itself. That's a crazy thing to say. But, even if we were to steelman that argument, baby animals definitely can't do that, right? So once again, it's extremely rose-tinted glasses when looking at suffering, and just ignoring it and twisting it into a fantasy version for your sick, twisted comfort, basically. There is no way to, I don't know if you can accurately acknowledge how bad suffering is and still, be willing to, use it for benefit, like that guy was advocating for. And he can say, "Oh, I'm not," but ultimately, unless you're against all suffering, then yeah, someone's going to suffer so that others can benefit. It's wrong. Hello.
Yeah, yeah, interesting topic. Um, so you think we should unalive everybody to stop all suffering?
We want
Um,
to have animal extinction
give me a
first.
justification behind it. What's your argument?
Yeah. No one should have
What's
to
that?
suffer. Nobody should have to suffer. No one should be forced
Okay,
into a
yeah, give
life
me
of
the argument for
suffering.
that.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't want to live in a
No,
terrible life
I'm
of
asking,
extreme
I'm asking for the argument. No, I understand the
suffering.
claim. I get the claim. You're saying that nobody should suffer. Can you give me an argument for it now?
Right. I think you've got some audio issues, so I'll try and answer that without you on the stream. Yeah. What's the argument? Okay. Decent question. Let's try and answer it. The argument is suffering is too extreme and terrible to allow. Nobody should have to suffer. just so that others can have fun. It's a system where you're taking advantage of others is wrong. Okay, and people have warped it into some sort of fantasy version where they can find a way to justify taking advantage and exploiting others and allowing them to face extreme, intense, prolonged nightmare, beyond nightmare level suffering and torture. So bad that it's, just beyond any question if it's acceptable or not. And, they're essentially willing to exploit these poor victims. Now, to sort of steelman it, which is always a good thing to do, to try and think of, how can we make a stupid argument more sensical and then argue against that. So, yeah, I like to think that, for empathetic people, they would never be able to enjoy life knowing that others are suffering needlessly, right? That their fun depended on the suffering of others. So, if someone was getting beaten up, let's say a child is getting beaten up in my bedroom while I'm watching Netflix, I personally wouldn't be able to enjoy the film. But I guess some people can. Now, non-sadistic people who wouldn't enjoy the film, they're going to prioritize the suffering over the pleasure, right? But, you have these people that are in favor of ignoring suffering, downplaying suffering, and exploiting, allowing, taking advantage of suffering. And they essentially, it's an interesting argument, because they can enjoy the suffering, whereas we can't. So is there ignorant enjoyment and pleasure and fun at the expense of these victims suffering? Is that somehow better or more acceptable? No, not really. I mean, I guess, in terms of the value systems that we're dealing with here, you have the value of continued life, the value of existence, the value of life, and then you have the value of extreme suffering and trying to prevent that suffering. And basically, they don't need the fun. They don't need the pleasure. And the ones suffering, they need the help. They need the prevention of that suffering. It's kind of a lot for people to wrap their heads around, I guess. But yeah, the thing is that suffering is so extreme, so bad, that you really have to be willfully or blissfully ignorant of how extremely bad it is to be willing to use it as a tool and to defend it and to justify it and say, it's fine to allow life to continue to be forced to exist and suffer. It's an inherently morally inconsistent position. It's an inherently irrational position. And, like I was saying at the start of the stream earlier, we can prove that. And, the thing is, if we were to do a long-form debate, we could absolutely destroy these people. We could go into all of the nuances, pick apart their arguments, and we've done that many, many times. Just search on YouTube, pro-extinction, go on the channel, go to the live stream section, watch some of our debates. If you watch the whole thing, because they're 2-hour debates against different people, every single time the person at the end is just destroyed, in tatters, in shambles. And that is the conclusion of anyone that you debate enough again about extinction, because it is an indefensible position to say that allowing babies to be abused so that we can have fun is acceptable. Now, they can try and worm their way out of that, but that is the reality that we're dealing with. And so, no, nobody needs the fun. Nobody needs to continue existing. it's really not that bad to cease to exist. It happens all day, every day. Every life that has been forced to exist is going to pass away at some point. So, the cessation of existence is already something that we have to deal with. It's not a new concept. Extinction is more about prevention. So it's more about preventing needless victims and needless suffering. Now, within that context, right, the vast majority of the stakeholders, if you will, are in the future. They don't exist yet. So really, it's kind of crazy to ignore them when they are the vast majority at stake here. You can say, you're really going to euthanize people that are existing, but they are completely ignoring the bigger picture, right? Which is billions of years of future existence. Now, for wild animals, their conditions have never improved or changed, ever in history. So the idea that we're all making this amazing progress is a fantasy, right? Animals have never benefited from it. They've probably only ever suffered from it, right? And the idea that you could do anything to help every last animal is just a fantasy. But yeah, so really, I guess that considering the fact that most of the stakeholders for extinctionism are in the future, you really have to look at it within that context. Because by focusing on the existing people, you're ignoring the vast majority of who's going to be affected here. And yeah, in that sense, extinctionism is more mathematically logical than the pro-life position, because we're all about trying to consider the bigger picture. So, if we are to consider the majority of stakeholders here, as obviously you should do, right? That's the point I'm trying to make. Then you have to look at it as a future sort of scenario of prevention, okay? So we can prevent more lives being forced to exist, and only the very lucky ones will benefit from it. Oh no, you're going to block me. I'm so sad to hear that. I do lose followers every now and then, people don't like to hear the truth. In the same way that, animals don't like to be made to try and behave. Cats don't like to live by your rules, do they? So yeah, so most of the prevention that we're doing is really in the future. So that means that you have to, if you're going to look at the majority of stakeholders here, which you should do, then yeah, the future existent beings, they don't need to exist. They have no current desire to exist. Forcing any life to exist is a bad thing, really. The only sort of way you could counter that is to say that some of them will be lucky, but again, the vast majority of life is very unlucky. So again, people are ignoring the majority of the stakeholders. Current life stakeholders would be, wild animals. They're the vast majority of the population, and yet people only argue about humans, right? So that's ignoring the majority of the stakeholders, which is crazy. And I think people do that because it's much harder to argue against animal extinction. So they warp it into something which is harder to argue against, right? They make it about genocide or something crazy like that, when that's nothing to do with anything. So, who's really looking at the bigger picture here? It's definitely not these people that are against extinction. The only picture they're looking at is their own selfish survival benefit. And again, they are by default not in favor of the benefit of empathetic people and responsible people who So they're essentially in favor of a system where you have selfish people abusing others and not caring about it. There is no other system where you have babies getting abused and people looking the other way and having fun. That is the system that we currently live in, and that's the system that people are advocating for to continue. Okay? Now, they'll say it's just the food chain or it's just nature. But, under the veneer of that, fake glossary are, real victims suffering real extreme misery and torture that they're trying to sort of brush under the rug. So, do you guys, are you starting to get what I'm saying? All right, the queue is empty. We have a free slot, should anybody want to come and discuss. And I'll even say that people that I wasn't going to let on earlier can join now. So the next person to queue up will be invited on. But yeah, like I was saying, if you want to look at this from a mathematical point of view, you have to look at the majority of the stakeholders, which is all future living beings. The only way you would be able to argue for existence continuing is to say that it's going to be worth it for some. People aren't even saying it's going to be worth it for most, right? So it's obviously a bad system. It's mathematically, it's extremely obvious. You have the number of wild animals that are born each year and, murdered by other animals or die from other terrible means. The number has something like 18 zeros. It's an insanely high number. There's far more wild animals than people actually realize. Especially when you consider how many babies pass away before reaching maturity. So, as we keep saying on this show, the dead don't write books. You can hear about people saying how they recovered from a terrible experience, but you're ignoring the ones that didn't recover, basically, right? So, the worst off victims are voiceless. They don't get to complain. We have to do it for them, right? The queue is still empty. That's fine. But yeah, I think it is a really interesting way to look at it. To say that to continue billions of years of more existence, right? For humans, it's easier to argue it. But for animals, is just, there's no way you can argue against animal extinction, right? They have the worst conditions, they suffer terribly. Euthanasia is already extremely feasible and possible and easy. Mass control, control of mass animal populations is already something we do. So it's not out of the realms of possibility by any means. But what is out of the realms of possibility is 100% safety from a bad life for all animals, right? That's an insanely impossible task without extinction. And, the thing is that all of these lives are forced to exist anyway. So it's not like they asked for this. And would you want to be an animal? No. So they're being forced into really bad stuff. Extinction isn't safety, really. I mean, how? For those that aren't forced into existence and suffering, it definitely is safety. The thing is, you have victims who have lives of pure hell-like suffering. If you really think about the worst off life on this planet, there's some really extreme stuff. And they suffer the most. The ones at the bottom of the spectrum, obviously, by default, suffer the most, right? And yet people ignore them, downplay their suffering, excuse it, even laugh at it, all these terrible things. But really, they shouldn't have to suffer. They shouldn't be forced to suffer. They're much better off not suffering. And, in so many of the cases, the experience is so extremely bad, so severe, beyond what you're comfortable imagining, that, they would, definitely be better off not existing. If it's like, would you rather go to hell or not exist, right? Obviously, you'd rather not exist. So, it's very simple to understand why extinction would be beneficial, right? It's about preventing, forced, extreme, hell-like suffering that you can't escape, that's... I really do think that a large part of the misunderstanding and confusion and resistance against extinction is down to a biological inability to empathize properly and to understand how severe and extreme suffering can be. Again, pro-lifers, they twist the narrative, they warp the narrative, they're dishonest about the narrative, they ignore the majority of the victims that we're trying to help and make it just about humans. So they're totally twisting and warping reality and the question and the conversation. But one of the worst ways that they do it is to create a fantasy version of the suffering, to strawman the suffering, right? I guess that would be the best way to suffer it. They strawman the suffering and the sufferers, which is, inherently illogical, irrational, and maybe dishonest, but if we're being generous and, if we're being honest, if I'm to be honest, then I don't think that they're bad people. I think that nature has made them bad people in that sense. Maybe they are bad people, but I don't blame them for it, if that makes sense, because nobody chooses the life that they're in. Nobody chooses their opinions or their preferences. It's a myth that you do. There's no such thing as free will, right? You were just born into your life and you're just a passenger, right? It might feel like you're in control, but that's an illusion. We live in a deterministic world. You don't really have choice or free will. I can't choose to jump out of a window right now. I can't choose to get naked and run down the street. You might say that, but you do have the freedom to do it, but I would have to have the desire to do it, right? So it's that desire that sort of determines what you actually do. So, I don't think these people are bad people. I think that they are victims of nature as well, right? They are victims of an animalistic, irrational mind and brain. So they're resisting logic, they're resisting rationality, they're resisting helping others and doing the right thing. But ultimately, they are also victims. So, we have to be empathetic to everyone in that sense. Extinctionists do absolutely consider the entire picture, the greater picture. We consider the pleasure, we consider the, benefits or value of life and existence, but ultimately, safety is more important. A suffering-free world is more important. A zero-tolerance policy on victims and suffering is more important. You wouldn't send someone to hell just so that you could send someone to heaven, especially if neither of them even exist, right? Why would you force them into existence which they never asked for, and then send one to hell, and then send one to heaven? Right, that is essentially, if you really kind of boil it down, that's what we're looking at, right? And yeah, there's no sort of point at which it becomes okay. You can't say that sending two people to heaven at the expense of one person going to hell is a good trade, right? There's no point at which it becomes okay. There's no sort of mathematics or ratio at which it becomes okay. It's still wrong. It's still unnecessary. It's cruel. You're forcing pleasure onto someone at the expense of forcing far worse suffering onto another life form. There's many ways in which extinction is provably the correct thing. But there's no pleasure that outweighs the suffering in this world, right? There's no pleasure that you can experience which is as intensely pleasurable as is intense the suffering experienced by a baby being abused, right? They're going to suffer far worse than you can have fun. And that's not even, the be all end all argument for extinction, but it is a good one. But ultimately, no one should have to suffer. Life should be safe from suffering. Yeah. The people saying that we should continue condemning life to be forced to exist and to be abused and to face extreme suffering so that we can benefit, they're the evil ones, right? People are looking at this from an upside down perspective. But again, pro-lifers are the ones saying all of these babies can keep getting abused and being tortured, and we should ignore it, and we should find a way to have fun and not think about it, and we should just benefit from it and exploit it, take advantage of the sufferers. So it's a completely upside down position. Whereas extinctionists are the ones saying, no, babies should not get abused, they shouldn't be tortured, just so that, the lucky ones can have fun. And, that is the absolute reality that we live in, where over 99.9% of life gets tortured and killed as a baby. Hello.
So how does so you're saying that suffering justifies the eradication of life?
Yeah.
How does it justify that?
So, yeah, no one should have to suffer so that others can benefit, right? And all life deserves to be safe from suffering.
So what if we what about the perspective that experience is valuable innately?
It's not more valuable than preventing extreme suffering.
By what metric? You have to substantiate that claim.
So, yeah, the value from existence and experience is less than the value of preventing extreme suffering.
Substantiate that.
So you only have to think about it in terms of your own life, anecdotally, right? We prioritize avoiding extreme suffering, even if it meant giving up a small pleasure, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So suffering outweighs pleasure 100% of the
I'm
time.
not saying pleasure outweighs suffering. I'm saying existence itself outweighs suffering.
But yeah, there's no real sort of value in existence anyway, other than a bit of pleasure.
That's your personal opinion. You still haven't substantiated that.
Well, can you suggest something other than survival and the odd bit of fun?
There's more to survival than the odd bit of fun. That's not what I'm claiming. You're claiming that suffering justifies the extinction of all life, and your reasoning for that is that suffering is so bad that we might as well not exist at all. So I wanna understand that and unpack that.
So yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple and easy to understand. The vast majority of life on this planet gets tortured to death as babies.
Explain that.
Yeah, so I mean, most life born on this planet dies a painful death during childhood from a variety of different ways, mostly by being eaten alive, which is one of the worst ways to go. But there's all sorts of other suffering. That's just the tip of the iceberg.
Can you substantiate that being eaten alive is one of the worst ways to go?
Yeah, I mean, that's like saying substantiate 1 + 1 = 2, right? It's just nonsense. It's an impossible standard. So, extinctionists aren't really suggesting anything crazy. But to suggest that you need to substantiate that being eaten alive is one of the worst ways to go, I mean, that's just obviously crazy, right? So, as I've been saying all day long, people that argue against extinction are, by definition, insane. And they will constantly come out with, extremely insane things. And the more you disprove them and answer their crazy questions, the more extreme their craziness will get. And the reason for that is that you have a massive biological system in the brain carrying out this operation. And it knows, I think it knows, or it functions essentially, effectively, in a way that it, virtually knows that it's wrong, that it's irrational. And so it has to defend that irrationality in order to maintain nature's priorities of mindless survival and reproduction and propagation. And yeah, the more it has to defend itself, the irrationality, the more extreme it will get and the more desperate it will get, to the point where it just starts saying really, really crazy, silly things. And, if you actually say, hang on, did he really just ask if being eaten alive is a bad experience, yeah, you can see, right, yeah, that was a completely insane thing to ask, right? Like, you'd have to be completely insane to question whether or not being eaten alive is a bad experience. So, what does this mean? This means that you have the vast majority of humans are demonstrably crazy, demonstrably irrational, demonstrably insane. If someone has to ask, is being eaten alive a bad experience, or they're asking me to prove it, then yeah, that's what I would call an unreasonable request, basically. Or to put it in less nice ways, completely insane. Right, moving on. Hello.
Hi there.
How's it going?
Good. I'm trying to understand your logic to this.
Go for it.
So, are you the arbiter of this extinction process, or how are you determining the value by which of who would implement this process?
So it's an organization, the pro-extinction organization, movement. It's a body of activists working towards extinction in a organized way. So, veganism, for instance, it's very disorganized. There's lots of disagreement there. But our organization understands that, it has to be done in an organized way. Otherwise, it's just going to be chaos, right? With people running around doing silly things.
Right. So in your organization, who is the person who is in charge of ensuring the extinction of life?
So we don't actually expect to achieve extinction within our lifetimes. We expect it to be a multi-generational project, to take a very long time. It's a very radical sort of ideology, right? For most people, it sounds quite extreme. So there's a lot of resistance there. But yeah, it's a good question. So how do you sort of settle on a hierarchy for the organization, I guess, is what you're asking. And yeah, it's basically determined by rationality and motivation. All of the activists in our movement kind of acknowledge that the ones at the top are, more intelligent, more rational, and more deserving of being the leaders. But anyone can question that at any time. And if someone wanted to be a leader or felt that they should be, then that it essentially revolves around rationality. So we don't rely on cult-like structure in that sense.
But I'm confused. There's more life seemingly in the universe. So is this just related to the Earth, or are you going to push this outward to attempt to extinguish all life?
Yeah, just as much of the universe as possible.
And so the people who would be responsible for doing that would need to stay alive.
Yeah.
Okay. So that doesn't seem rational to me if you're pro-extinction, but you're not willing to extinguish your own life. Like from the get-go.
Yeah. So the thing is, if our movement stopped existing, right, then that would be a massive step back for extinction.
So you need life in order to go extinct.
Yeah, you can't cause extinction without anyone to cause it, right?
No, I don't agree with that.
So you think that we can cause extinction without having anyone to cause it?
Yes. Like it's literally physics. The heat death, or either you go with whichever theory you want to go with for how the universe goes. Either everything is going to expand out.
What you're saying here, really? I mean, you're talking about the heat death of the universe. Do you understand how long away that is?
It's still your goal.
No.
Like everything will cease to exist at that point.
Well, not necessarily.
And you're not needed for that process.
Not necessarily, right? You don't know that for a fact, for sure. And secondly, there's lots of suffering in the meantime that needs preventing.
Again, but that entails that you must stay alive and suffer in order to achieve a goal which is going to be attainable anyways.
Well, like I said, it's not necessarily attainable. And it's that definitely doesn't help. Inaction doesn't help the life that is suffering, right? So on Earth, for example, animals are going to continue suffering pointlessly for billions of more years unless we put an end to that, right? So it doesn't make sense to say that we should just wait for the heat death of the universe, because there will be lots of suffering in the meantime that you'd be allowing cruelly, basically.
Right, but again, I'm trying to understand why you think that you're the special person who gets to determine that, rather than being the first person to commit to your cause.
Well, like I said, committing to our cause, you're being very dishonest there. I've just explained why that would go against our cause. It's like asking a firefighter to just go home and say, you know what? The fire's going to go out eventually anyway, right? If you really want to put this fire out, you should just go home. Again, this is demonstrable insanity of our guests here. It is scientifically demonstrable that they are insane. Only an insane person would ask such a question. And only an insane person would be so incapable of understanding the answer that was given, right? If you're saying, why do anything about suffering when it's going to go extinct billions of years from now? that's obvious. For the sake of the victims who are suffering now and who will suffer terribly for many more years unless we stop it. So you'd have to be very crazy to not understand that. Yeah, like certifiably insane, perhaps? I would say so. Hello.
You don't make sense, dude.
Yep.
How can it be demonstrable if it's not proven? You like to say the term a lot.
Your audio.
Demonstrable means to be proven without a doubt, pretty much.
Yeah.
It's not proven, though. Nobody's done it.
Done what?
I mean, people unalive themselves every day, yet there's still a lot of suffering going on. I don't understand how that makes any sense.
What's your question?
I just asked you. Please explain. It's easy to derail a conversation.
Okay. Right. Nice try, dude. But maybe have a real question next time.
Hi.
Hello. How's it going?
Good. I have a question. Do you think if our human societies develop technologies that would needlessly end suffering, do you think we wouldn't, in your view, have to do this mass extinction event?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is,
do you think we're on that trajectory, though?
I don't think we're on that trajectory. No. The thing is, at the minute, the world is run by dictators. Okay, always has been, really. There's still extreme racism, hatred. How many wars are going on in the world right now? So the thing is that in terms of on the right trajectory, all we really have is a bit of technological improvement, but that's not always a good thing. So again, I wouldn't say that we are really intelligently improving very much. We still have tribalism, hatred, war. Every single world leader is a dictator, basically. So we have a very crazy world.
But that's the minority, not the majority. That's a very small minority of elitist human population that view themselves as those things. Like their egos, obviously, are what direct them to do those things. Obviously, the vast majority of human people throughout civilization have basically been, lower class people that haven't had any say in the decision making of those elite people that do go off on these wars and do cause the suffering that you're saying.
Yeah, but they have had lots of power to do something about it, but they've never done anything about it.
So what you're saying is if there was like a perfect utopia where all suffering was taken care of, that would be your only really ideal civilization?
Well, yeah, I mean, the sufferers need the help the most, right? It's more urgent to help those that are suffering.
Do you think that's like a little idealist, though? Do you think that I mean, obviously, right now it's not feasible, but I think that's always been the trajectory of human civilization, is one towards at least a common understanding that we are all one people, we are one civilization.
The thing is that humans are biologically prevented from that sort of world peace, right? In very severe ways. We are biologically made to be tribalistic, to discriminate against others, to ignore suffering, downplay suffering, not value it, not focus on it, out of mind, out of sight, and to just focus on ourselves. So I think it'd be very difficult to get any kind of world that's going to be better than this.
Don't you think that in part is due to like education, though? Like obviously we had Darwinism and social Darwinism impact people's education, which kind of justified their tribalist outlook.
But that tribalist outlook isn't, it's not a vice or something. It's literally foundational to the human mind and the way and brain and way it works. So there's not really been any progress in the world, I would say, not realistically. And it's just going to keep continuing on with wars and exploitation, taking advantage of others. We need, ideally, we'd have a world where everyone's on the same page, and there's world peace. We don't have to have militaries wasting loads of money. We don't have to have, borders wasting loads of money and all of this bureaucracy that's built around tribalism and, keeping all of the resources on our side of the fence and stuff like that. It's a very sort of hateful world that we live in, but that's nature. We have animalistic ways of operating.
But
So no,
your take is that we end the suffering now rather than letting it continue?
We should end suffering as fast as we can, really, for the sake of the victims, right?
By euthanasia?
Yeah, potentially. But the thing is that we need a strong and healthy humanity so that we can have animal extinction, because they can't do it by themselves. And then we should research whether or not we can extend that to the rest of the universe in any way. And then finally, humans come last.
How would we extend it beyond the universe if we cannot? Wouldn't that require some type of technological leap from what we have now? If we were to try to do that, it would require probably more technology to end all of suffering in the world or the universe than it would to just advance to a new stage or new era of human civilization that has far less suffering than it does now.
But you see, reducing suffering is a tool of the oppressors. If you can end suffering and choose not to, then it's unfair to the victims, right? Now, yeah, the thing is about continuing on for the universe and stuff is that any suffering that we incur on that mission is going to be a drop in the ocean compared to the suffering that we can prevent.
But you don't think that there's any type of role like, let's say, if you believe in the theory that humans are the only intelligent humans or intelligent life in the universe, do you think we don't have any kind of predisposition to kind of being the caregivers of this universe if we have the intelligence to prevent it?
Well, firstly, we might not be the only intelligent life, but secondly, I would say that having the ability and awareness of our ability to help sufferers and the awareness of how extreme their suffering is and how unacceptable it is, that gives us the responsibility to go and prevent that suffering and prevent as much as we can.
Yeah, and you just said that we may not be the only intelligent life, so obviously that means that there could be other civilizations that are more enlightened, who have more of a universalist outlook on their own civilizations, where they do, try to prevent suffering to the extent that they can. Do you think they wouldn't be able to provide the tools if they were helpful to us, if we were trying to go on that same trajectory?
If we were flying around and found some aliens that were also, understanding of how urgent it is to stop suffering, then yeah, we could team up with them for sure. But, maybe they would be aggressive and we'd have to fight them. Who knows, right? But yeah, we could team up with them, but that we don't believe that there's any sort of enlightenment, whether it's for humans or for aliens, that can make exploiting, babies getting tortured acceptable.
But you agree that there's less suffering now than, let's say, like the Middle Ages or, any other period of human civilization?
The thing is, you're thinking of just humans, right? The majority of life on this planet are animals. Their suffering is never improved or reduced, right? And, we're not on a good trajectory anyway. We created the internet and that's been great for lots of things, but it's also created a new industry, a brand new industry that exists only because of the internet, of online abuse, right? You have sadism, you have children being, abused, you have animals being abused on camera. So there's a massive industry that's, come up. Now, we might keep improving medicine over the next 100 years, but that will also improve our ability to create bioweapons, viruses, and will also improve our ability to torture others. So in this sort of tribalistic world of different countries and spying on each other, for example, we'll have super medicine maybe, but we'll also have super torture, we'll have super viruses. So it's just blind optimism that everything's just going to be okay, basically.
I mean, I can see what you're saying with, obviously there's always going to be these kind of evil actors trying to pull strings. I mean, I think that's been the case with all human civilization. We had Genghis Khan that would needlessly slaughter entire villages when he would conquer them, and he would move through entire civilizations and leave nothing in his wake. I think I mean, personally, where we're at in civilization is in a crossroads where, I mean, we have more access to information than we've ever had before. The fact that you are able to have this conversation on a live right now proves that, 100 years ago, this wouldn't have been possible. And, we wouldn't even be able to rationally have these philosophical discussions to begin with because people were too focused on, you know, meeting their material needs. But right now, all of us are living better lives than a king would live in 700 AD. We are all
But
currently living better lives.
for the majority of the population on this planet, who deserve to be given the priority as such, right? Animals, their conditions have never improved.
Well, do you believe animals are sentient? Do you believe they can feel things like we do?
Yeah.
I mean, I would disagree with that. I think there's a capacity to what animals can experience. I mean, I know
But
they
you
have
don't
pain
think
receptors like we do,
dog
but I think,
being eaten up by a human doesn't feel pain?
wait, repeat that? Sorry.
If someone abuses their dog, you think that's okay because they're an animal.
I think there's obviously, I think
You
as
do.
humans, we can
You think that's
distinguish
okay?
between, I think we are individually distinguish between what is right.
All right. Animal abuse is okay now, apparently. Um, anyone I don't like isn't conscious and doesn't feel pain. So that homeless guy I beat up last night, I've decided that he wasn't conscious, so it's okay. That's basically what you're saying, dude. These pro-lifers will just find ways, amazing ways, to imagine a world where suffering is okay. But that's what it takes, a powerful imagination, and to say some really crazy things. How much proof do you guys need that humans are inherently insane? Maybe extinctionists should come up with, a new title for our species. Maybe we should be Humanity 2.0 or something. Because it's kind of gross to call myself a human when, they're literally saying that it's okay for animals to get, tortured by sadists because, think of the balance, think of the pleasure that the sadist is getting. And, the animal doesn't feel it. They're probably not even conscious. So, there's no actual rationality here. It's pure bias, extreme bias. And there's actually no way to rationally defend all of these terrible positions. Because they're objectively wrong, right? They're objectively, demonstrably insane, inconsistent, irrational, and oftentimes completely just crazy. So, we're the ones saying that animals and babies shouldn't be tortured just so that others can have fun. And people are like, wow, what a crazy idea. So yeah, not really proud of my species at the minute. You know what I mean? Again, the pro-life position allows for unlimited suffering. It doesn't even care to investigate the suffering. It's just saying, there's probably a balance, forget about it, right? When you've got extreme suffering on the line, they don't want to take it seriously. They're just like, it probably balances out. Let's not think about it, right? Or they have to warp it into some fantasy version like, everyone's suffering can just opt out. It's a perfect system. Like, wow, what a fantasy world they're living in. The queue is currently empty, so we are waiting for our next guest. In the meantime, let's discuss... What should we discuss, chat? Maybe we should take some comments from the chat. You didn't say that, though. Okay, buddy. Extinctionists are all atheists. Yeah. There are some spiritual extinctionists, but they're really more like etherists, because they're very crazy. They don't do any serious organized activism. They're very irrational, closed-minded. They're just... You can't really have a spiritual or religious extinctionist. It's like having... what kind of contradiction could you even compare that to? But you can't have an irrational, rational person, basically. Dodging the hard questions, I see. Your questions are very confused. I think you're very confused. I'm dodging your confusion, maybe. Why don't we have a look at the website? We keep mentioning the website. We've got it kind of on the background, but we don't actually look at it very often. More people should check out the website. It's actually full of some really good information about the movement. So let's go into it. Do you have to be vegan to be extinctionist? No, extinctionists do not have to be vegan. Veganism is actually bad because it causes more and worse suffering when you consider the impact on wild animal suffering. Veganism also fails to advocate for animal euthanasia and population elimination, safety from suffering. And asking a person to be vegan or non-vegan is kind of like asking a person whether to kill a person with a blue shirt or a red shirt, because if you go vegan, you're going to cause lots of wild animal suffering. If you go non-vegan, you're going to cause farmed animal suffering. Now, technically, we do think that if you look into it, and this is on our website, on the full FAQ, that veganism causes much worse suffering. However, we do have vegan extinctionists out of preference. If they really can't bring themselves to eat meat, but they understand everything, then that's acceptable. And we try not to go too deeply into the personal lives and to demand too much perfection, in that sense. Otherwise, we'd have no one in the movement. We've got some standards, for sure. Like, you can't be antinatalist. So let me read it out. Isn't this just antinatalism? No. Antinatalism is a self-defeating ideology. It's opting out of the system instead of fighting it. It leaves the world to horny sadists. And for every human you prevent, you wrongly transfer the suffering to thousands or potentially millions of wild animals who otherwise wouldn't exist because of the resources that humans take up, especially land. So for every human that exists, an incredible amount of resources are used by that human throughout their lifetime, and a lot of that involves taking up land and denying that land to wild animal populations. So that's it's a good thing to deny land to animal populations, because it means that fewer of them are forced to exist and suffer. Humanity must stay big, strong, and healthy to be able to help end all animal suffering. It could take thousands of years to overthrow the pro-suffering current society that we've got, and having fewer people fighting against that system is a bad thing, obviously. Antinatalism is bad in every way. It would have the world collapse into crisis, with 90-year-old dementia patients having to look after themselves while also trying to carry out animal extinction. So it's completely nonsensical, unrealistic, and lazy. There's no logic for how antinatalism can be anything but bad. Now, like veganism, it might make sense in the future, but in the current context, if you look at the bigger picture, it is actually a bad thing. Who can join the movement? Not just anyone can join. Currently, the gene pool for people smart enough to be responsible for ending suffering is very small. Only people who quickly agree that ending all suffering is a good thing and should be worked towards will realistically be effective members in our organization. There is some wiggle room on this, but not much. People who have doubts about whether or not we should work to prevent forced existence and suffering will most likely not be a good match. To those people, we say, go and live your life. Why get rid of people who are innocent? Why are you going after them? Why is total extinction necessary? That's a good question. The thing is, without total extinction, there's always going to be a risk of repopulation and more suffering, right? So, even extinctionists, now this might change in the future, but, we are willing to say that, if we were the very last ones and, it was like, I'm the only life form in the universe now, do I need to go extinct as well? Potentially on the basis that you could go crazy tomorrow, you could change your mind, you could try and repopulate the world, open a laboratory and start cloning life to bring it back or something like that, who knows? So, you have to take risk management to the extreme, because it's an extreme risk and an extreme problem. Q is still wanting, so we're still waiting. The next debate challenger is being waited for. Shall we look at more of the website? So what I just read was off of our basic FAQ page. We have a much longer one. We also have our manifesto. This is an interesting read. Most people don't read it. The core problem, recognizing the reality of suffering. The world has a severe problem that most people refuse to fully acknowledge. That problem is extreme suffering. The victims include children suffering from bone cancer and abuse, animals tortured by sadists or torn apart by predators, families screaming in war zones. These victims endure bigotry, natural disasters, crime, diseases, mental disorders, and no one deserves this pain. The biggest issue is that society ignores the big picture. Victims of existence don't just suffer and die, they reproduce, forcing the next generation to suffer and die all over again. There are countless unborn children who could face kidnapping or trafficking. There are countless animals waiting to be born, just to be locked in cages and killed for a quick meal. Countless future victims will face diseases like Alzheimer's and bone cancer and terrible accidents, brain damage, severe trauma. So, all of this suffering is terrible and should be prevented. And it's not good that it's being allowed, right? Freedom for suffering is freedom for bad things. The cycle of pain must stop, and the first step is recognizing the problem. Historically, the world's ethics and philosophies have been built on bigotry. People use excuses like following religious books, or they only care about specific groups like white people, straight people, or just humans. Many decide that suffering doesn't matter unless it's convenient for them. These are highly unethical views disguised as morality. True ethics must focus entirely on the victim's perspective. Only the victims matter because they are the ones feeling the pain. Unfortunately, society currently punishes burning a non-feeling religious book more harshly than harming a living being. And that's a fact. The abstract idea of nature is protected more fiercely than the actual wild animals suffering inside it. That's a fact. We live in a system where oppressors use their own feelings to decide what matters and ignore the victims. That's a fact. We reject all bigotry, recognizing that all suffering is bad, and it's the only bad thing in the world. Any ethics not focused on suffering is just a convenience-based immorality, disguised as something ethical. Furthermore, suffering is built directly into existence. For example, a lion must kill a zebra, or the lion starves. Neither the zebra running away nor the lioness trying to feed her cubs are the villain. It's the biological design itself that guarantees pain and forces them into this existence. Disasters, diseases, wars, predation, all of these terrible things will continue forever until we stop it. As long as these conscious beings are being forced into existence, their suffering will continue to happen. So if existence is the problem, then the only logical solution is non-existence. Less intelligent beings fear non-existence because they can't see the logic, they can't get over their survival instinct, which is inherently irrational and a bias. If non-existence were truly that bad, then people would mourn every unborn sibling they never had and every unborn being that's never existed, right? And using birth control would be considered deeply evil. But people don't cry for an unborn child, but they cry when a real child is harmed. Non-existence is simply the state before you were born. It's like a deep, dreamless sleep where you feel no worry, no loneliness, no pain. It's a total peace and safety from harm. It's the exact same state that comes after death. Applying pure logic means we have a strict obligation to stop the cycle of suffering and forced, terrible existence. We must prevent future victims from being born to save them from billions of years of more horrors. We must work towards a peaceful extinction for all conscious beings. That's the purpose of our movement. In this movement, suffering is defined as any physical or emotional pain, anxiety, or mental disorder that a conscious being wants to avoid. So any experience you want to avoid, but it's forced upon you. We focus on the extreme, inevitable suffering. We separate suffering from pain. Pain is a physical sensation, but suffering is pain that you actively want to escape. So you can go to the gym and feel a bit of pain, but you don't mind it. So this clear definition makes it a fact that suffering is universally bad. Yes, do some people benefit from suffering? Yeah, if you have a naughty child and you have to scold it or something. But even then, you could do it in a way where it doesn't have to suffer. most of the suffering we endure doesn't help us. If I've just had a serious health condition for the last 6 months. That's not helped me, right? People getting cancer aren't benefiting from their suffering. The vast majority of the suffering in the world is completely unhelpful. And the vast majority of life born on the planet dies far too young to benefit from any suffering. So the idea that suffering is beneficial is a myth. Well, I'm not talking to myself, Cam. I'm talking to the camera, to the viewers, to the stream, potential people that want to debate. I would say that you're the insane one. If you've never seen a TikTok stream with someone talking into the camera, then you'd be lying. So your brain must be extremely warped and twisted to think that you're making any sense right now, because you're really not. Yeah, I mean, I had you on, Cam, but you were just so crazy that I just thought it was too tedious to deal with. You're saying things like being eaten alive isn't that bad. Come on, that you can't debate with like a pigeon kicking over, you know what I mean, chess pieces on the board, right? That's basically what it is. There's no point arguing with someone that says that being eaten alive isn't that bad. They're just dishonest and insane. I mean, that is what you said, though, So don't try and deny it, And just because I'm calling you out for it doesn't mean I'm going to let you get away with denying it as well. Yeah, your defense mechanisms are kicking in pretty hard right now, Cam. Let's take some comments from chat. So, are you for forcing extinction? Yeah, the thing is, there's nothing wrong with forcing extinction. We'd rather do it in a peaceful way, but if we had to do it forcefully, then why would that be a bad thing? It might be bad for the ones that are resisting, but what about the victims that they're trying to keep suffering, right? So, and there's nothing wrong with murdering people. Well, I'd say that murder is always a bad thing. Someone always suffers from it. But the thing is, if we had that kind of mentality of absolute pacifism, what kind of world would we live in? We'd still have slavery because nobody would have gone to war over it. We'd have no police. The criminals would just be allowed to do whatever they want, unimpeded, right? You could walk into a bank with a weapon and, commit as many atrocities as you want, basically. That's what you're suggesting. Why should we stop the abusers, is what you're suggesting. Hello.
Hey,
How's it going?
yeah, I was curious, like, what you think about utopianism versus extinctionism. Like, I feel like you'd have a lot less pushback getting people on board with building a perfect world as opposed to going against their own survival instincts and just saying, yeah, let's end it all.
Yeah, it's a good idea. It's something that I'm looking into, and it's an important thing to definitely consider, and I am considering it. In a sense, you could say it's kind of part of the bigger picture, right? So it's a great question. Something more all-inclusive than extinctionism. Yeah, it's a good idea. I am actually actively considering it. I guess we're currently trying to get people on board for something that most people are against, though, because within that sort of utopian perfection, you would still have to have extinction, right? So yeah, that's kind of one of our main issues right now, is that people are completely against any form of extinction, even if it is in the greater good.
Yeah, I mean, I guess most rational people probably see, on the news or whatever, like all the insane suffering going on in the world, but they weigh it against probably their own everyday experience and the experience of most other beings. That's not like it's not 24/7 like agony for most people. You know what I mean? So I think extinctionism is like, unless we enter a world in the future where it's just like more and more suffering for more and more people and more life, I don't think we're headed in that direction. But like, unless we enter that kind of world, I think it's going to be hard to get people on board with this versus like, let's just try to make the world better for life. You know what I mean?
But the thing is, making the world better for life means extinction, basically. Realistically speaking, unless we have 100% safety for all life, then it's not good enough, and that's very unrealistic without extinction.
Yeah. I mean, I think that also goes to it, I guess it appeals to whether or not you think life is worth living, even if there is suffering, right? Like,
Well, it's not about myself. It's about being responsible for others, and having a system where you allow the worst suffering possible to an innocent is wrong, right?
yeah, that's true. But, that's why we have, animal shelters and humanitarian groups. Like, we're people are fighting it. It's not like we see problems and we just let it happen. We fight back as much as we can. It's just that we have, it's sort of a constant thing where you have to monitor and act. And right now, there's no like automatic way to prevent all suffering. But like, as we see it, it's not like a police sees, someone getting abused and just like kind of turns a blind eye. Like, we try to stop suffering as much as we can. Most people do, I think. But it's not going to be perfect
I
right
wouldn't say
now.
most people. I wouldn't say most people. I would say that most people are against changing the status quo. They're against responsibility. They're against stepping up, and they really just want to kind of live their own life and ignore the rest of the world and not be a part of it. That is the majority of the world, right?
I would agree to an extent. Like, most people aren't going to get up out of their chairs and like go look for suffering to stop, I guess. But I think if you present people, like, if someone sees someone kicking a dog, I don't know if you can say that on TikTok, but like, something like that, I'm inclined to believe that at least most people would think it was wrong, right? Whether we get to a point where most people would act on it is different, but I think we're innately, like, we recognize suffering as bad and we innately want to do something about it, at least. Whether we
So
actually do, yeah.
it's an interesting question. I think that the problem is that most people are, and again, it's a biological thing. So I'm not like blaming them for it. I'm not saying that people are bad people or whatever, but people are inherently selfish, right? So they might, like you said, see some suffering and say it's bad, but they won't get out of their chair and go and look for suffering, right? They won't be selfless in that sense, and so they have a very limited sort of tether for how much they're willing to do and to sacrifice of their own time to help others, right? They kind of have a bubble. If there's a bit of suffering in that bubble, they might do something about it, but they want to keep their bubble small, and yeah, it's not good enough, basically, that system. But that is the
Mhm.
world we live in, and that's why I would say we have dictators running the world. We have hatred and violence. It's an animalistic thing. We are essentially just seeing animals with computers. That's it, really.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I just wanted to come up and bring up the utopianism thing. I'm glad you're looking into it. I'm not like a utopianist or anything, but I was just like, that seems like I was Googling it while listening to you talk, and it seems like a decent enough alternative. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, the really interesting thing about that is that people are very resistant to extinction as an idea, but if we could maybe have it as part of a bigger idea, like optimizing everything, perfection, world perfection, something like that. Now that's something that we are actually seriously investigating, but there are considerations that have to be taken before we just go ahead and do it.
right.
So we're doing some research on that, because there's actually some like big considerations and big dangers to it as well.
Yeah.
But
Like, what happens if you run into I brought this up in the comments, like if you run into a utopian society, or say extinctionists take over the earth or whatever, and whatever that means, and then they go to another planet, find a utopia, or at least just find a species that just doesn't want to go extinct. Like, what do you do?
Yeah. So the thing is, if some of their species were suffering, then obviously that it'd be bad. But to kind of steel man it, people ask this question a lot. What if you found an alien species and they're really intelligent and they don't suffer and they don't want to go extinct? Well, we would have to look at it within sort of the bigger question. How does this affect the mission of extinctionism? And are they a risk? Are they a liability? Are they a threat? Are they going to could they change their mind? Could they develop and evolve into something which suffers, or create life which suffers? So you'd have to consider it in the bigger picture. Do we need to deal with them now, or can we leave it for a bit? Might they join as extinctionists? Can we lobby them to do that? These are all really exciting and interesting questions. But like all of these kind of questions, they are kind of bridges that we would have to cross when we get there. We can't plan for every eventuality, but we can build the vehicle that gets us there.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess so. But it is kind of like relevant to, like, even on Earth, like you'll run up against opposition or whatever eventually if this takes off. But anyway, that's all I wanted to chat about.
Yeah,
See
that's
ya.
great. Thank you for coming up. Take
Yeah,
care.
thank you.
The queue's still a bit empty, so you've got me for a while again, guys. Sorry about that. There's a couple people in the chat that I know pretty well. That's interesting. Let's see who else we've got. He is bad people and was bullied. Oh, that's cute, but wrong. I think a problem I have with this idea is you're taking away people's choice. The thing is, like, why should people's freedom be more important than reducing the risk of suffering to zero? That same choice that you're talking about in the chat is, that freedom is what allows people to go and commit atrocities. I was reading about how some neighbors kidnapped someone's cat and, tortured it to death. That's the same kind of freedom that you're advocating for, basically. It's not a good thing. Hello.
How you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
We're doing well. Could you elaborate a little further on what exactly your point to the life here?
Yeah. So we should work towards ending all suffering, preventing all suffering, having a suffering-free world, as as fast as possible, for the sake of the victims who are being tortured. Basically, our fellow life forms are being tortured horrifically. It's going to keep happening. They're going to keep being forced to exist and to suffer terribly. There's nothing worse out there than this. It's the worst thing in the world. It's the ultimate bad. It's so bad it's unacceptable. We should, undo the mistake that nature has made of forcing all this life to suffer, and we should have, a suffering-free world.
Are you referring to suffering due to natural disasters or due to mankind, a combination?
So all suffering, but if you want to talk about, what types of suffering, the vast majority of the population on the planet is wild animals, and they suffer the most from all sorts of different things: starvation, parasites, diseases, being eaten alive, being chased every day by murderous animals, all sorts of terrible things,
Yeah, but that's a natural part of the animal world. That's not suffering. That's just nature.
Well, they do suffer, though, right?
No.
Just because it happens in nature doesn't mean that there's automatically and magically no suffering, right?
Well, there's suffering for the animal that dies, sure, but it's not. It's not being done to cause that animal suffering. It's caused for survival. It's why it's nature. It's why it's why it's the animal kingdom.
Yeah, it is nature, but it's still bad for any life to be forced to exist and to suffer terribly.
How would you stop that? How would you control that?
By having animal extinction, so total extinction, and we can do.
How would you survive?
So we would have to remove our dependency on animals. That would be a difficult process, but a challenging one, but I think we can do it. And then the mission would be to try and cause universe-wide extinction, or as much as possible. Now, it might be the case that none of it is possible to reach, but we should definitely see if we can. So yeah, animal extinction, space extinction, and then finally human extinction.
I'm not quite. Maybe I'm totally not following your reasoning. Is your point to annihilate everything where there's no longer life at all?
So it's more about prevention. The vast majority of the victims who will suffer are in the future. They haven't been born yet, and they don't want to be born. They're better off not being born. So it's not really about going around annihilating things. It's more about preventing and providing a safety from forced existence and from forced suffering.
But that would you can never end that. You can't stop this. As long as an animal exists, it's going to have a will to survive. As long as a man exists, they're going to have a will to survive. That's you can't stop that. And the only way to stop that is in all life, across all spectrums.
Absolutely. So it's a big challenge, but it's not necessarily impossible. It just might be challenging.
No. Oh no, it wouldn't. No, it's not hard at all. You got to do is drop a couple of nukes and it's over.
No, actually, that's a myth. Nukes are a bad way to cause extinction. For example, the asteroid that wiped out most of the dinosaurs. Firstly, it didn't wipe out all of them, and secondly, it had the power of over 1 billion nukes, and that is so much more than we have on Earth, and it still didn't do the job. So
I agree with that. I agree. It didn't. It did annihilate all those, but it picked up life again, so it didn't eradicate everything. I agree with that. Luckily, there was some that was buried very, 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 very deeply in the ground. That's how it got restarted. Luckily, maybe we have bunkers, to allow that to happen again. Maybe there's some type of animal who can bury that deep again and allow that to happen again. Usually, it's just a one-time off. Usually, things like that don't repeat themselves. But it's definitely doable. I mean, if that's your goal, is to end suffering by removing the cause of that suffering, which would be life itself.
Yeah.
Just like I said, drop a couple of nukes, airborne diseases, biochemical warfare, all these things all at one time, and it'd take care of everything pretty much. We can wipe it off the face of the earth if that's what your goal would be.
I mean, the thing is, there's life at the bottom of the ocean. You can't just drop a couple of nukes, and even if you did drop loads of nukes, like 1 billion nukes, right, it still wouldn't be enough. That's not an effective way to cause total extinction. It has to be done in a much more structured and organized way.
Yeah, that's why I added in the others: biochemical warfare, airborne diseases. You put that into the water systems, things like that. It kills all life eventually. I still
The
don't
thing is
understand why
about
you would have
like
to do
these
that.
biodiseases, they cause extreme suffering, right? Ideally, we'd use euthanasia, which is the most ethical and painless way to do it, right?
You said lethal injection.
Well, there's different types of euthanasia, but that could be one.
Maybe I misheard you. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, I don't think spreading diseases and dropping nukes would be an effective way to do it. We would need more of a structured euthanasia program. And yeah, it might be airborne, or it could be some sort of virus that doesn't cause too much suffering, or it could be something like that. We don't have all the answers now, which is why we're working to grow the movement to make it possible to find and work on the best ways to cause extinction.
So I'm sorry. I'm trying to understand your frame of thought. So you'd rather see all life extinguished than for any type of suffering to exist. Am I following you right?
Yeah, it's about preventing billions of more years of horrible suffering and providing safety from forced existence and extreme suffering, right?
You're not forced to. You're not forced to exist.
Well, everyone's forced to exist, right? Nobody has to be born.
Yeah, but you're not forced to continue that existence out. You can check out anytime you like. Anytime you like.
The thing is, for the vast majority of life on the planet, that they don't have that choice, right? Animals can't just make that decision. They can't make decisions.
No, but you can make it for them. But you can make that decision for them.
How do you mean?
Unalive them. You can make that decision. We have, us as human beings have wiped out many animals to extinction through time.
Yeah.
All we got to do is allow it to happen.
Well, allowing it to happen doesn't make it happen, right? If we do nothing, then nothing will happen. So we do have to cause it to happen. Yeah.
If you allow certain diaphragms of men with certain abilities in their hand, and they will take care of that for you. And be willing to do so. Not only animals, but people too. They'd be willing to do it for you. Just give them the means and the legal ramifications of doing so, and they will take care of your problem. There's plenty of people willing to do this.
Well, it should be done in an ethical and responsible way, right? And the thing is that they're probably not going to do it properly. I don't think you can trust some psychopaths to go around and carry out an ethical mission, basically.
Yeah, but What would make them any different than what you're advocating for?
So we're doing it out of compassion, responsibility, morality, ethics, all that good stuff, right? Whereas most people are just selfish. They're not going to try and do the right thing.
Who dictates this? Who sets up this structure and who controls it? And who dictates how this goes about? And are they going to take their stuff out in the same way? Or are they just going to continue to exist while everybody else is gone and now they got everything to themselves? You have many, many issues with what you're talking about that comes along with this. Many. That's why you don't give the men that kind of power. Because with that kind of power, no one has guidelines over them. They have the guidelines. They make the rules.
Well, that's kind of the way the world works, right? We have to, make the world we want to live in and be the change we want to see, right?
But you wouldn't get that change because what you want to happen, that person's going to do to you, and you won't never see this change happen. There is no favorites in this. When you set this up and give these people power to build this structure and control the structure, they call the rules, not you. You're going to be a product of your own design.
All we care about is the greater good, what's right. So
but what is right?
If I get fired or something, but they're still doing the right thing, then I don't care.
But what is right? That's what I'm saying. You don't have all the answers. You don't know what the correct movement is. You don't know what the correct method is. You don't know how to go about this correctly. You just think you do, or maybe you're thinking about it as you go along.
I do. You think that I think I do?
No, I said maybe you do. I don't. I think this is really wild.
You're accusing me of thinking I have all the answers, right?
I'm assuming that maybe you think you do. I didn't say you did. I said you think you do.
No.
This is dangerous, bro. You do know that, right?
It's not more dangerous than allowing, all this. There's nothing more dangerous than what we've currently got, right? You can't actually.
Yeah. I don't want nobody.
Get worse.
I don't want
nobody.
Get
worse than it already is.
I don't want. Well, yeah, it can get way worse. Evidently, you don't remember a man with a little mustache. he did this exact same thing that you're talking about.
Even that particular individual had virtually no impact on the vast majority of suffering in the world, which is wild animals.
That's true, but it did unalive 9 million people for no reason, no more than it. They didn't have blonde hair and blue. They only had blonde hair and blue eyes. That's the only reason. What you're talking about here is really dangerous, my guy. I'm sorry. This is dangerous.
Suffering-free world is the the ultimate good, basically. There's nothing more dangerous than a world with suffering.
No, you can't stop suffering. It's a process of life. It's a byproduct. There ain't nothing you can do about it.
You can try. And you should.
No, you should not. This is dangerous. You're bringing.
It's not more dangerous than the current system. You can't cause more suffering with extinction than you prevent, right? Billions of years of extreme suffering. And how could extinction make things worse? Even if you did have a war between humans, right? Over 99.9% of the population is just wild animals. They never see a human. They're never affected by humanity. They're just out there killing each other, doing PvP. They're in a different server. So, in terms of it being dangerous, you're not thinking about the wild animals that are suffering terribly. You're just thinking about your own safety, I guess. Now, our other guest, G, or I think it was G, right? I still like to think that he brought up an interesting point. Now, it is something I've been kind of mulling over. Should we wrap extinctionism into a bigger ideology? But the thing is, that's going to give people false hope. And if they have to accept something else with extinction added on, are they going to accept it? Probably not. I mean, it's an interesting question. It's something, I am looking into. It could be interesting, could be useful. I will tell you, though, that it has been tried before. And it failed. But, we could try again. There's only 7 people listening to this craziness. Yeah, true. I did get up to like 15 earlier. And I'm still getting loads of new followers from it, actually. Streaming is really good for growing the channel. Every time I stream, I get like at least 10 new followers, which adds up. It does actually add up over time. You got to be crazy to engage with this. Do you, though? Forced existence of trillions of beings into extreme suffering that can be prevented. Is that really a crazy topic to be looking at? No, definitely not. These people against extinction, they just don't value or consider the ones that will benefit from extinction, right? They never really consider them or give them fair consideration. They just spend the whole time ignoring them and downplaying them, straw manning them, giving fantasy versions, right? It's simple, guys. Should we have a suffering-free world, or should we have a world where babies keep getting abused and tortured? It is one or the other. You can't have 100% safety from being forced to exist, which again is a bad thing, and from extreme suffering and a life of hell, which is obviously a terrible thing. You can't have safety from that without extinction. So, we would have to say, for me to be against extinction, I would have to effectively say, like, oh, they're suffering, but, others are having fun, so it balances out. Which, I'm trying to put myself in that sort of mindset to try and understand it, but it's such a shallow mindset and so extremely ignorant, right? To just say, oh, there's a balance, right? It's effectively to be completely devoid of any sort of intelligence or any sort of brain, because there isn't a balance. What balance are you talking about? Can you show me the balance on a map? So the balance is just a fantasy in their head. It's a fantasy excuse, a fantasy justification for allowing babies to be tortured. Yeah. I'd suffer for others' happiness, okay, but, I don't think you would. Not if it's that extreme. Okay, who's next? Let's see. Yeah, most of the people kind of justifying suffering and resisting extinction and condemning, all of those life forms to be tortured for, horrifically for a long time. They're the evil ones, right? And they're the ones that need to justify it. They're asking us to justify ending suffering, preventing suffering, which, is obviously a crazy thing. But they're the ones that are essentially condemning the vast majority of life on this planet to a terrible life, to extreme suffering, to forced existence, effectively extreme slavery, so that the minority can benefit. I mean, it's just disgusting, right? I'm sorry, your ideology is extremely selfish. How is it selfish to say we should have no victims, no suffering? You're the selfish one trying to say we should have, babies getting tortured so that I can, play video games. and I'm the selfish one, you think? Gonna have to disagree with that, I'm afraid. Let's see if there's any comments worth replying to. No one is forced to exist. Well, that's just wrong. Were you given the choice? No. Everyone can just check out. How can a baby do that? Okay, you're trolling, bro. You're trolling without realizing it. Yeah, you're the selfish one if you don't want to end suffering. That's right. It's pretty black and white. We have good, we have bad. We have good people saying no one should have to suffer and be tortured. Then you have the bad people saying we should allow most life to get tortured because some people benefit from it. Like, am I sounding crazy here? It's so obvious. It's so obvious. The fun of the privileged and the lucky does not outweigh or make up for or justify the extreme torture of the innocents. That's just simple morality. That's just obvious. That's the building blocks of morality. Check the babies out, stop their suffering. Oh yeah, just so let's get this straight. You want life to be forced to exist, to suffer so badly that it gets to the point where there's no other option. It has to be euthanized. And then you want babies to conduct their own euthanasia while they're, being tortured, basically, by cancer or whatever else is happening. So you want babies to be born with cancer and to then have to unalive themselves as babies. That's your bloody position, mate. That's how crazy you sound, right? You're trying to justify suffering, and you end up sounding like a complete clown. Because there is no rational or intelligent way to say that babies should be tortured. There just isn't. Who's my favourite philosopher? I don't have one, really. Extinctionists are actually against philosophy. It's just kind of mental, fun, to put it nicely. It doesn't actually serve anything. It's just a distraction and a waste of time. It's not a good use of time. But it gives you more perspective, and on what? More ways to defend suffering? Yeah, not interested. Q's still looking a bit weak. Very weak, actually. Anemic, even. So yeah, it's kind of difficult to put yourself in the mindset of someone that's saying suffering's okay. It's some people deserve to suffer. There's balance. I always find it funny, this balance thing, right? You've got on one side of the seesaw, you've got some NPCs eating pizza and brain rotting. And then you've got extreme torture, having your eyes ripped out while you're still alive, having your intestines pulled out in front of you. There's obviously no balance there. So there's so many ways to look at it and to say, yeah, you know what, you're right. But they can't. They're biologically incapable of doing it. Did you find it conceivable that your movement could incite a war? Yeah, we have thought about that. But they fought a war to end slavery, and everyone's happy about that. Police officers have to rugby tackle criminals to the ground sometimes. cause them a bit of suffering, and no one questions that. Everyone thinks that's a really good thing. The victims need defending, right? Sometimes force is required for defense. That's just the way the world works, Blame the world, not the solution, if you really want to blame someone. Nobody said there's a balance. Lots of people are saying there's a balance. Most people, actually. I'm saying it's unfair. I don't think you are, mate. I think you're very confused. Resisting extinction. Yeah. Most people are against extinction. Probably because it's their nature to resist, right? The thing is, so why are we seeing people struggling to think about extinction so much? And the answer is that so nature and species propagation actually benefits from lower intelligence. So that means that nature, it's looking like it actually, obviously it doesn't have its own intentions, but if you were to anthropomorphize nature and to make it more easy for people to understand, nature essentially decided that, realized that having less intelligence in a species was a good thing, for the only thing that nature cares about, which is species propagation, getting the numbers up, and reproduction. If you've ever seen the film Idiocracy, then you know what it's all about. The more intelligent people are less likely to just mindlessly reproduce. They're more likely to question the system that they're in. And nature didn't want anyone to question things like, is existence good or bad? Is reproducing good or bad? Should we do anything other than be animalistic and focus on our survival and reproduction? Nature didn't want that kind of stuff. Nature was like, that's good stuff, but that's bad for for what I'm doing, right? So nature essentially made life evil, so that it would, and stupid and evil, so that it would, eat others, mindlessly focus, selfishly focus on survival, and mindlessly reproduce. That's all nature needs. Nature needs you to be stupid, to be selfish, and immoral. And that's just a fact. Like, you can't really question that, right? So humans have got that same, insanity, basically. Do I consider myself a misanthrope? No. I mean, you'd have to sort of kind of, get my opinions on it, but I don't go around calling myself a misanthrope. We mostly just feel sorry for humans. A bit of hatred, maybe, yeah. But we also feel sorry for them. They're forced to be stupid, right? And selfish. Can't be nice for them either. And they're just using coping mechanisms to try and cope with it. Defense mechanisms. At least TikTok allow us to know what kind of crazy people are out there. I'd say that, a suffering-free world isn't crazy, especially for the ones that will benefit. What would you make of this idea that this is a revenge fantasy? Yeah, so a lot of people struggle to understand the motivations for extinction. They think it's some sort of obsession, some sort of rage thing, like we want to see the world burn or something, because they can't understand compassion and empathy. So, they don't have that themselves, so they can't actually put themselves in our shoes and understand, the empathetic reasons, the compassionate reasons for it. So they have to sort of straw man some sort of revenge fantasy narrative, right? Yeah, it's another interesting thing, actually. You know, people they try to understand an extinctionist, and you know, are these people crazy? Are they dangerous? You know, I'm trying to figure it out, but they actually can't understand our position. They can't understand our motives for it because they're biologically prevented from doing so, and therefore they are forced by their brain biology to have a very negative perception on us because they can't understand the position. They're prevented from understanding it. True compassion and empathy leads to nihilism. True compassion and empathy leads to wanting to do the right thing, wanting the best for the world, wanting the best for everyone and as much life as possible, wanting a perfect world, I would say. And, you know, that is inevitably includes a world where we don't allow life to be forced into hell-like suffering. So, you know, people ask a lot about this nihilism thing. I've never really understood it. I still don't really understand it. You know, they're obsessed with meaning, but like, what is meaning? What are you even talking about? So, you know, if nihilist means, in my context, not saying that meaning justifies animals and babies being abused, then yeah, call me a nihilist if you want. I don't care. But, you know, there's no sort of higher purpose or meaning. I mean, what is meaning anyway? It's just a form of pleasure, basically, right? It's a form of understanding the world, coping with the world, maybe enjoying it if you're lucky. So it's a pleasure thing. That's all it is. It's just another pleasure thing. This meaning thing is nonsense, right? It's either spiritual or it's just another way to hide the fact that you're prioritizing pleasure over the victim's suffering. So, you know, we don't believe there's some sort of magical meaning that means that babies should get tortured. Definitely not. Yeah, no worries, Kev. Thanks for joining us. And catch you later. Nietzsche believed Christianity was the religion of pity and ultimately lead to your ideas. Well, you know, we're not Christian, and looks like Nietzsche was wrong. Right? Extinctionists are atheists. We don't like philosophy. We don't like religion. We don't like spirituality. All of these things are just distractions from helping the victims. Who are the victims? All victims, right? The worst off victims are the ones who would be better off not existing and not having been forced cruelly and unfairly to exist, right? No one should be forced to exist. No one should be forced to suffer. That's just obvious. Okay, I think we've got someone joining. Just give me a sec, guys. Just moving about the house. Right, we're going to take a break. I'm going to get some food, use the loo and whatnot. I'll be back in, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes.